Hi, welcome back, and thanks for joining me. This is Kat Carr. I have a page on Facebook called Communicating with Non-Human Creatures, a view of the unspoken world. Kind of continuing where I left off. My last story happened in 2014, and there's Molly the cat. Come on, Molly. My cat Molly's wanting to get on my lap. In 2015, my dad ended up passing away. He was really sick and hospitalized that entire year. He had been in and out of the hospital for several years before that, but the entire year of 2015, he was hospitalized. He went from being in intensive care to being in like a specialized care facility, and then he was able to move to what I guess would kind of be considered like an assisted living or nursing home type setting. That was when he was conscious. Before that, in ICU and specialized care, he was in and out of comas. But he ended up passing away at the end of 2015. So that was a really moving year for me. There were actually good experiences that came from that. But those are totally different stories. Just to know that when he passed away at the very end of 2015, I ended up moving from the country to his house, which is in a subdivision. It's still a pretty rural area, but I moved into his house to kind of fix things up and take care of things. And that was actually during the time when I created the page in, I believe it was early 2016. It was sometime in 2016, but I had just, continuously been exploring my ability and, gaining more and more appreciation for life in all forms. And I think around the time when I created the page, because I know the very first picture that I ever posted was of this green caterpillar. And I also had posted some pictures of some moths, because we used to have so many moths that would come and stay on the porch where we had our porch light on overnight. We would come out at night or in the early morning, and there would be just like hundreds of moths. So I was always taking pictures of moths and just really loving, having experiences with them. But the caterpillar experience was kind of different. The one that I photographed, there were several caterpillars that I interacted with. The caterpillar was the first non-human creature that I communicated with in the presence of another human, because up until this point I hadn't really discussed it with anybody else. But my oldest son has been very mature for his age, and we had been through a lot with my dad being sick and my dad passing away, and my son had shown incredible maturity, because at the time when my dad passed away, my son was 10 years old. But it was funny because, there were so many people that I realized that they had kind of odd views about, death and what happens after death and all that kind of stuff. And my son was just like, took this really mature stance on it, and, knew that there was life after death. And I was able to communicate with him during the times when, I needed strength. As my dad was sick and everything, I was able to talk to my son about deeper things than really anybody else. So, if there was anybody that I was going to reach out to and say, there's something going on, I need to show you, he was the person to do it. Because, definitely I think whenever you're kind of exploring something like this, and, you're even having doubts in your own mind or not really sure how to talk to other people about it, you have to be careful who you talk to. You don't want to just go having coffee with the neighbors and be like, well, guess what I did today? I'm talking with insects. I mean, they're just going to think you're crazy. Or, if you have I do have some great neighbors that, they would probably listen to me, and they're very open-minded. So they might be like, hey, that's cool, and maybe, but I still, they're not going to be my first choice of a person to go and talk to. So My son was, though. And I had this caterpillar that was outside, and I had him on, it was either like a little rock or a little stick, and I was able to move him over to my patio table. And I'm talking to this little guy, and he was so funny, like the personality of this caterpillar. He was, so open and friendly, because let me just tell you that not all creatures are super friendly. I mean, not that all creatures are, out to harm you or anything, but it's just kind of like with meeting a stranger, like another human being. I mean, if you're out in a public place and, like maybe you're at an airport or a bus station or something, you go and you try to sit down and start talking to strangers, there will be some people who are very talkative, and there will be some people who don't, maybe they're not in the mood to talk, or maybe they don't like talking to strangers, and they'll just kind of blow you off. There'll be some people who will be cordial and, say, oh, hi, how you doing? Yeah, the weather's great or whatever, but they're not going to be like, really talking deeply to you or anything. And that's okay. But it's the same way with non-human creatures. I mean, there have been some that I've tried to communicate with, and they didn't seem to be in the mood, or they were kind of, wary of human beings, which I think most non-human creatures have every right to be wary of human beings, because of our history with them, is not always very good. It's usually with human beings in a place of dominance, or, even exterminating them for basically no reason. But the caterpillar was extremely friendly, trustworthy, which, it's only now connecting with me. I had never really thought about it before, that, hello, caterpillars become butterflies. And, some of the creatures I've had the deepest communication with were moths and butterflies and other flying creatures, so I don't know, maybe it's something about that, but caterpillars become butterflies. But I wasn't thinking about that this time. I mean, it just looked like this really neat neon green worm, and we're communicating, and, the little guy is kind of playful. He's kind of like a show-off, because I start, I'm like, you can really understand what I'm saying, and he's like, well, sure, and I'm like, okay, well, can you move to the left? Because he's like kind of walking around, and I'm like, can you move, this way? And I point, and I'm like gesturing and like thinking in my mind to the left, and he immediately turns and goes to the left. And I said, okay, cool, thank you. Can you move the other direction? Can you turn and walk to the right? He immediately, just like I'm talking to a, 6-year-old child. I mean, you say, can you walk this way? Okay, thanks. Can you walk that way? And, they would do that. And this caterpillar was doing that. And he also kind of like stood up on his hind, with his upper body up in the air, and was like kind of wiggling. And I was like, oh, he's dancing. I was like, you're so funny. And I said, do you mind if I get my son to come and talk with us? And I said, because he's not going to believe this, but I think he would really enjoy meeting you. And he's like, oh, sure. So it was funny because, I had some stuff on the table, and I just got up and walked away from the caterpillar and went inside to get my son. And I don't know if he was playing a game or, what he was doing, but I'm like, come out here, you got to see this. And he's like, what? But he comes outside. When I come back out there, I'm trying to kind of like tell him before we get out there. We walk outside, and the caterpillar's gone. And I'm looking around the table. I'm like, oh, man. My son's like, oh, my gosh, Mom, what are you doing, And I'm like, well, I was going to show you. This is really neat. This is really cool. But I was like, darn, the caterpillar's gone. Just then he pops out from behind something, like I had, a vase or something on the table, and he pops out. It's like, here I am. I was like, oh, okay. I'm telling you, he was a character, like, playing hide and seek and stuff. So he comes out, and I start telling my son, I said, I'm talking to this guy. And I could tell him, can you go to the left? And he does it. And the caterpillar does it right in front of his eyes. He's like, whoa. I said, yeah. Okay, now can you go to the right? The caterpillar turns and goes the other way. And he's like, whoa, that's pretty neat. My son's like, that's pretty neat. I said, okay, can you show him your dance? Can you show him your dance? And the caterpillar stands up on his hind end, his hind legs, with his upper body in the air and starts doing the wiggling thing. And that's what blew my son's mind. He was like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, this guy is something special. And I said, well, that's what I'm trying to tell you that all creatures are. I said, this guy, all creatures are really special. This guy's just really friendly, and he's kind of a ham, you know. But that was when I ended up taking pictures. I didn't record what happened. And now, you know, years later, I'm thinking, oh, well, that would be great if I could have that video, you know, like I could have some proof. But that's when, you know, I've come to the conclusion, like I said previously, I'm not here to prove to anybody. So first of all, I'm not here to make anybody believe. I mean, if you're listening, you say, oh, you know, that's bullcrap or whatever. Well, that's fine. I'm not here to make anybody believe, and I'm also not a teacher. I can't necessarily teach somebody how to communicate with non-human creatures. But I'm here to share the experiences. And, you know, looking back on it, I really don't think that was the time and place to record, like, the guy wanted. I mean, he might have been okay. The caterpillar might have been okay with putting on a show for everybody, but I didn't feel like that was the time and place, you know. It was just something that it took me to the next level because I was working on my communication abilities, and this little guy is showing, like, hey, I hear you loud and clear, you know. Yeah, like, I can hear you. I can even do what you're saying. You know, we're very smart. So that was whenever I took those pictures of the caterpillar, and I started the page, my Facebook page, Communicating with Non-Human Creatures, a view of the unspoken world. But I didn't do anything really for a few years with the page. I just kind of had it out there, trying to think what format I could use to present the information, because I knew typing this stuff would take a long time, and, you know, that's a lot of typing, and I don't even know how I could capture people's attention where they would sit and read a really long story or something. So I thought, you know, I just need to gather more information. I need to gather more information and more experience, and when it's the right time and place, I'll be able to present this information. So that was my experience with the caterpillar and how I started this page. That was in 2016. I have another experience from 2016 that I'd like to share, and that's probably going to be my final episode for now. I'll add more later if I can, but right now I'll go ahead and close this program, and thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll join me for my next one, which I'm about to record here in just a few minutes after a short break. See you then.